Hello, good morning everybody. My name is Aris Ardianto Putra and along with my partner Mbak Siti Mukaromah, we are going to have presentation on sociolinguistic class and we are going to discuss about the chapter 13 sociolinguistics and education. Shall we begin? Let us begin. We are going to start from the introduction and we are going to talk about the standard and the non-standard language. Linguists are agreed that no variety of a language is inherently better than any other. They insist that all languages and all varieties of particular languages are equal in that they quite adequately serve the needs of those who use them. A standard variety of a language is better only in a social sense. It has a preferred status. It gives those who use it certain social advantages, and it also can increase the opportunities in work and education. The non-standard varieties tend to produce the opposite effect. Now we are going to talk about standard and non-standard language. Many people believe that some languages or varieties are better than others. For example, um, some languages are particularly beautiful, others are primitive. Some dialects might be more expressive, but the others are deficient, and so on. In other words, it is widely believed that you can be advantaged or disadvantaged not just socially or aesthetically, but also intellectually by the accident of which language or variety of a language you happen to speak. And this discourse is especially prevalent in discussion about education. In this chapter, we will take up relationships among sociolinguistics, education, and social justice. We will address three main topics, all of which involve the hegemony of standard languages and the role of education should play with regard to the standard language ideology. First, we will look at issues of social dialects and how ways of speaking associated with lower socioeconomic classes and ethnic groups are often viewed as disadvantages in education. Second, we will consider issues of multilingualism in education, again noting that there is a history in many places of viewing minority languages as a disadvantage in terms of education. Finally, we will examine the educational issues involved in the growth of English worldwide. All three of these topics earlier involve involve the concept of linguistic inequality, which is defined by Bonin in 2030 as the unequal social valuation of particular ways of speaking, which due to the indexical nature of language reproduce wider social, cultural, and economic inequalities. This section addresses a number of interrelated questions about language and education. What role do children's home dialect and discourse pattern play in their access to educational opportunities? What is the role of schooling face-to-face language? Many people would argue that the role of education is to teach children how to use the standard variety, even if we accept this perspective, how can educational program make all children's home languages and cultures a resource they can use in learning? Bernstein claims that there are two quite distinct varieties of language in use in society. He calls one variety elaborated code and the other variety is as restricted code. According to Bernstein, these codes have very different characteristics. For example, the elaborated code makes use of accurate grammatical order and syntax to regulate what is said, uses complex sentences that employ a range of devices for conjunction and also for subordination. It also employs preposition to show relationships of how a temporal and a logical nature. It shows frequent use of the pronoun I. It uses with care a wide range of adjectives and also adverbs, and it also allows for remarks to be qualified. According to Bernstein, in 1961, the elaborated code is a language use which points to the possibilities inherent to inherent in a complex conceptual hierarchy for organizing of experience. Restricted code is a style of language use associated with informal situation, characterized by linguistic predictability and by its dependence on the external context and on the shared knowledge and also experience of participants for conveying the meaning. In contrast, restricted code employs short, grammatically simple, and often unfinished sentence of poor syntactic form. It also uses a few conjunctions simply and repetitively, employs little subordination, tends toward a dislocated presentation of information. It is also rigid and limited in the use of adjective and adverbs. It makes infrequent use of impersonal pronoun subject. It confounds reason and conclusion. Makes frequent appeals to sympathetic circularity. For example, uh, utterance like something like that, and also use idioms frequently. And restricted code also is a language of implicit meaning. Many linguists believe that language should not be an issue at all in education. They regard all varieties of a language as equal and say that what we should be doing is teaching everyone to be tolerant and accepting of other varieties. Milroy in 1999 stated that what actually happened is that although public discrimination of the ground of race, religion, and social class can no longer be done overtly, it appears that discrimination on linguistic grounds is perfectly acceptable, even though linguistic differences may themselves be associated with ethnic, religious, and class differences. Fairclough in 1995 goes even further in his criticism of any kind of life and let life solution. He criticizes he criticizes that the language awareness approach advocated in various government reports in England, in which students are taught standard English but asked to recognize the legitimacy of other varieties for certain purposes. He says that this is a doubtful bit of social engineering, that passing on prestigious practices and values such of such as those of standard English, without developing a critical awareness of them, implicitly legitimize them. That is, dress up inequality as diversity. One of the issues which is basic to the design of curricula for teaching children who speak a dialect other than the prescribed standard is what role the home dialect will play in the classroom. Siegel in 2007 addresses the use of creoles and non-standard varieties in education, pointing out multiple problems with prohibiting the home language of children. This includes the social, cognitive, and psychological disadvantages of being told that one's way of speaking and being wrong and undesired in the school context. That kind of thing lead to children to struggle with identity issues surrounding their heritage, insecurity about expressing themselves in front of the teacher and also in front of the classmates, and also difficulty acquiring literacy skills. Siegels goes on to outline three different ways in which the home dialect of the children can be incorporated into instruction. In instrumental programs, the language is actually used for instruction. For example, the use of Tok Pisin in school in Papua New Guinea. Tok Pisin is a name of language. And the second programs is accommodation programs. It allows for particular tasks such as creative writing or oral expression to be carried out in the home language, as in a reform of secondary education in Jamaica. The third programs is awareness program, include accommodation activities but also involve explicit learning about different varieties of the language and the social process through which one dialect become the standard. Awareness programs also include a constructive component in which the students learn about the rule govern nature of all dialect and contrast the rule and patterns of their own variety with the standard. All such programs above the previous ones require a recognition of legitimacy of the home dialect of the children. If the teachers and administrations do not wish to legitimate the dialect, then it cannot be used in the classroom. It is possible to both legitimate the dialect and teach the standard, of course, but this requires an ideological stance which allows for something which is called pluralism and acknowledge the linguistic inequality. Finally, there is a pedagogical issues. Many educators believe that immersion in the language or a dialect to be used in education that is standard is the best way for children to learn that variety. However, research does not support this view. While obviously exposure to the standard variety is necessary, complete immersion has not been shown to be the most effective way to learn that standard. Moreover, denying the legitimacy of the children's home language may have a serious negative impact in terms of both social and psychological development. Next, we are going to talk about the multilingual education. the first thing that we are going to talk about is the ideologies. This section introduces some of the research and main ideas of both sociolinguistics and language education body of research. A major topic in research on multilingual education is, of course, the language ideologies which inform education programs, teachers' practices, and also students' participation in class. The issues involved here are much the same as those addressed in the last section on the chapter that talk about non-standard dialects, like the legitimation of the home languages of the children, also um, the issues of the social identities that are related to these languages, also the issue of exactly how the home language might be used in the classroom. Wiley and Wright in 2004 present a sobering review of minority student education in the United States, noting that the ideologies present are reminiscent of the earlier periods in US history with a focus on restriction and social control, which is based on racism and linguistic intolerance. Anti-bilingual programs and high-stakes testing, which is the use of standardized tests to evaluate students' achievement and teachers' effectiveness, have negative effect on minority language speaking children. Another research by Wright and Boogie in 2007 addresses the social and psychological advantages of programs which support ideologies of plurality and the value of minority languages spoken by the children in the classroom. They pointed out that children's self-esteem is higher if their home language is legitimized in an educational setting. What is often called by the Ramirez report, it is a report written by Ramirez et al. In 1991, which is submitted to the US Department of Education, was the result of an 8-year longitudinal study of over 2,300 Spanish speaking children from 554 classrooms ranging from kindergarten to sixth grade in 5 different states. It compared different program types and found that the more years of bilingual education children had, the better they performed on English standardized tests in the sixth grade. The next large-scale study, which had similar result, was by Thomas and Collier's. Um, it is a series of publication based on a 5-year studies of 210,054 students, records for children from kindergarten to 12th grade across the country of United States. Again, they look at the students' performance according to the type of the program the children were enrolled in, and also found that bilingual education programs were more effective in creating successful students in the long run. Okay. And further findings, they found that the more time the students spend learning in the minority language, the better they did. Genesi et al. In 2006 also show that English language learners who participate in two-way immersion programs are less likely to drop out of school, have higher long-term academic achievement, and show more positive attitudes on the whole towards school. Although the majority language background part of the population in two-way immersion programs has not been studied as extensively, there exists no evidence that there is any negative impact on students who are in bilingual programs in the United States, and they have the positive benefit of learning a second language at a young age. However, even in bilingual education programs, there is a clear ideology about the importance of language purity. Educators frequently debate how languages should be used in the multilingual context, and in many cases, a strict separation of languages is seen as desirable. In cases where teachers or students use bilingual discourse, another issue is how the language are used. Patterns in which the dominant language is used, and another ideological issues involved in the use of bilingual discourse in the classroom may have to do with the status of the minority language itself. Even in bilingual programs, the minority language may not command a great deal of respect in comparison with the majority language. Even if the language is valued for in-group interaction, it may be seen as less relevant for success in the wider society. The next part that we are going to talk about is about elite and immigrant bilingualism. Part of the status of bilingualism and the use of two languages has to do with the ideas about immigrant bilingualism and elite bilingualism. Immigrant bilingualism is usually low status. Immigrant languages are associated with poor and disenfranchised uh, in the term of segments of society. This association causes many people to associate bilingual with stigmatized identities in society. They then view speaking two languages as something which is not desirable. On the other hand, elite bilingualism means speaking two languages which both carry high status. In many countries, speaking an international language such as English, for example, in additional to the national language, creates an elite bilingualism. Lo Bianco in 2004 writes that the bilingualism of immigrants and poor people is often construed as a major social problem, threatening national cohesion and endangering security. Such attitudes about bilingualism create a distinction between so-called elite bilingualism and immigrant bilingualism, which is not about language proficiency or the particular language involved, but about the status of the people who are associated with its category. It is low status to speaker a minority language natively, but on the other hand, it is high status to learn a second language if you are a native speaker of the majority language. For example, um, if you are an American, to learn Spanish, then you are having immigrant bilingualism. But if you are in Indonesia and you speak English too, then you have elite bilingualism. That's the problem of elite and immigrant bilingualism. The next part we are going to talk about Education and Worldwide English, which will be presented by my partner, Mbak Siti. We are going to meet again after this presentation for the question and answer section. Thank you.